Is Freeman's attorney writing a 10-page detailed letter to CNN demanding an immediate retraction and a public apology. The cable network standing by its reporting as Freeman's attorneys aggressively push back on the several allegations.
Morgan Freeman's unexpected appearance on a popular evening broadcast caught viewers off guard the moment he stepped onto the stage with a solemn yet determined look. The anticipation in the air felt electric, as the famous actor, known for his calm demeanor and measured tone, was about to speak on a matter far removed from his usual artistic discussions. The program's host introduced him without the typical fanfare, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Everyone watching seemed to realize that there would be no lighthearted anecdote or benign commentary. Instead, the hint of tension in the actor's gaze suggested he was prepared to delve into something startling. Accusations regarding Donald Trump's alleged affairs and the catastrophic impact he believed these transgressions were having on the marriage between the newly elected president and First Lady Melania Trump. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. A collective hush fell across living rooms and social media feeds nationwide as Freeman began his commentary. There was a clear sense that whatever he was about to say would reverberate far beyond a typical celebrity interview. He launched into a meticulously detailed account of what he called a pattern of indiscretions, painting a picture of clandestine meetings, whispered rumors, and suspicious signs of marital discord. The careful, methodical way Freeman proceeded suggested a man who had either compiled these details painstakingly over time, or had been handed them from a source he trusted implicitly. In the blink of an eye, the atmosphere transformed from a casual television spot to a serious exposé, the gravity of which left viewers simultaneously intrigued and uneasy. Watching from their homes, people started to question how this revelation would affect the nation's newly minted first couple. There was an undercurrent of shock that such claims were being brought forth by a figure like Freeman, a man typically admired for roles that exuded wisdom, patience, and compassion. Many had never associated him with such a direct confrontation, especially one that placed him opposite the highest office in the land. As he wove a narrative of suspicion and alleged betrayal, every household tuned in felt an undercurrent of amazement that a revered Hollywood icon would choose to step into this fray. Some viewers recalled that Freeman was outspoken on social matters, but the direct nature of his accusations about the president's personal life carried an entirely different magnitude. He spoke with an unyielding tone, presenting these claims in a way that made them sound not merely like unfounded rumors, but rather an unspoken truth that he believed had lingered unchallenged for too long. No one could miss how, beneath the measured cadence of his discourse, there was a subtle mix of frustration and moral conviction. It was as though he believed he had a responsibility to reveal something crucial. He framed these alleged affairs not as trivial or salacious pieces of gossip, but as pivotal insights into the character of the man elected to the highest office. The marriage in question, from Freeman's perspective, had been under enormous stress, tested by the demands of public life and weighed down by personal issues simmering behind closed doors. The actor alluded to instances in which Melania Trump was said to have grown distant, suspicious, and increasingly wary of the public spotlight, her discomfort becoming more visible with each passing official appearance. News outlets latched onto the broadcast immediately, replaying segments in which Freeman described various alleged instances that suggested the president had been less than faithful. The entire development was extraordinary. Rarely had a high-profile Hollywood figure so openly challenged a sitting president's personal integrity on a major network. Social media platforms lit up with endless debates. Some contended that Freeman was stepping out of line, capitalizing on his celebrity to sow discord in a new administration. Others lauded his bravery, claiming that when a figure of Freeman's stature spoke out, it forced a more profound conversation about accountability in the highest echelons of power. Part of the shock value came from how Freeman spoke about the potential emotional toll on Melania. He portrayed her as a figure caught in a maelstrom of secrets, forced to bear the weight of humiliating allegations while standing by her husband's side through the frenzy of the campaign trail and the triumph of election night. The notion that Morgan Freeman, a man usually revered for his calm and uncontroversial public persona, had decided to cast a light on these delicate personal matters, intrigued viewers. It also led them to question what might have driven him to come forward in such a bold manner. He referenced the strain on the marriage as an ongoing issue, one that could have dire repercussions for the image of unity the administration sought to project. His words rippled through the political arena in real time. Pundits scrambled to analyze the impact of such allegations, recognizing the potential for immediate fallout within the White House. The administration had barely settled in. The first major controversies had only begun to surface in the public eye. But this direct and personal critique from an unexpected source was different. It sparked questions about how Melania, typically reserved and poised, would handle this sudden, very public challenge to the authenticity of her union. Conversations erupted among commentators who pointed out signs of tension during public appearances, such as fleeting moments of seeming distance or reluctance in body language. Now these moments were being re-examined in the context of Freeman's accusations, lending them a new layer of meaning that fueled a growing narrative about a troubled first marriage. Observers also drew attention to the gravity of an A-list celebrity implicating the president's personal life so openly. While in recent history, other figures had criticized presidential policies or questioned political decisions, fewer had delved so pointedly into a sitting president's marriage. The entire situation was unprecedented in its rawness. Men and women, Republicans and Democrats alike, took to every available platform to voice reactions. Some demanded evidence or proof, contending that if Freeman's words were genuine, they needed validation rather than rumor. Others believed that his statement alone indicated enough cause for suspicion, pointing out that where there was smoke, there might be fire. Behind the scenes, media insiders pieced together a possible impetus for Freeman's choice to break the story. While he had never made it his mission to be a tabloid-style figure, some insiders speculated that he felt a moral imperative to use his platform to hold powerful figures accountable. During past interviews, he had displayed a willingness to speak forthrightly about issues of justice, equality, and truth. Yet even for an actor known for having a moral compass, this marked a startling leap. The sense was that he had decided the time for politeness or subtlety was over. He feared perhaps that silence might enable more damaging behavior. As these accusations spread through every corner of the media world, the newly elected president found himself under a bright, unrelenting spotlight. His staff seemed ill-prepared to deal with the personal nature of the claims. Political strategists, typically geared to responding to policy criticisms or controversies over executive actions, had to contend with swirling questions about an alleged pattern of infidelity. There was no prepared script for this. The administration found itself balancing the desire to maintain a facade of normalcy with the urgent necessity of damage control. They avoided discussing any direct response to Freeman's words, likely hoping the story would fade on its own. But with social media ablaze, complete silence was virtually impossible. The more the administration refrained from addressing the claims, the more the speculation grew. In the midst of this public storm, Melania's position became a focal point for countless discussions. She was the embodiment of elegance in her official role, often praised for her fashion sense and her carefully choreographed public appearances. Yet after Freeman's declarations, people analyzed every movement she made, every faint flicker of expression. Did she appear more aloof than before? Was there a moment at a ceremony where she seemed to hold herself physically apart from her husband? The public's hunger for visible signs of strain or validation for Freeman's claims was insatiable. Tabloid commentary soared, with pundits dissecting the subtle gestures between the first couple. The focus shifted from political discourse to personal drama, overshadowing policy announcements and official engagements. At the same time, the nature of the allegations themselves prompted a deeper cultural conversation about marriage, power, and responsibility. High-profile marriages had always drawn immense public scrutiny, but none more so than when one spouse occupied the country's top political post. Observers debated whether it was fair or ethical to delve into the private issues of a couple with such vigor, even if that couple lived in the White House. Others argued that a president's personal integrity was emblematic of his overall trustworthiness, and thus any alleged pattern of infidelity had genuine public relevance. Freeman's statements appeared to challenge the notion that the personal and the political could remain entirely separate in a modern media environment. While the broadcast that featured Freeman was replayed endlessly, another dimension to the story gained steam: speculation about the timing of his revelations. The initial shock of hearing a beloved Hollywood figure level such claims against a newly seated president gave way to questions of why he chose that particular moment. Some pointed to early hints of friction between Hollywood and the Trump administration, hypothesizing that Freeman may have felt the need to publicly voice his concerns about the moral fiber of an individual who had recently ascended to such power. Others believed it was the result of a personal tipping point, something that convinced Freeman to step forward, culminating in that tense broadcast. Regardless of motive, the repercussions across social and political lines were swift and unyielding. The discussion was not limited to mainstream platforms. Online forums, where anonymity let people express raw opinions, burst into heated arguments. Supporters of the president condemned Freeman as an opportunist wading into gossip. They claimed he lacked credible evidence, dismissing his statements as an attempt to grab headlines. Conversely, a contingent of viewers heralded Freeman as a voice willing to speak truth to power, applauding his boldness in telling a story that many believed had been simmering under the surface. Rumors about Trump's personal life had circulated long before his presidency, but few public figures with Freeman's stature had addressed them in such a direct, unfiltered manner. One of the most gripping aspects was Freeman's emphasis on how these alleged affairs affected Melania. He painted a picture of a woman caught between her public duties and private anguish, forced to endure damaging whispers about her husband's faithfulness. This perspective inspired empathy from observers who had once dismissed her as merely stoic or unapproachable. Now she was seen by many as a casualty of her husband's alleged recklessness. Conversations shifted from discussing her fashion choices to questioning the emotional toll these allegations might inflict on her. Commentators wondered how she would navigate public appearances with the knowledge that the entire nation was talking about her marriage. It added an intensely human angle to a drama typically overshadowed by political maneuvering. The broader implications of Freeman's statements extended beyond personal gossip. There was a sense that this scandal, if proven true or even if widely believed, could chip away at the new administration's credibility. Voters who placed their trust in Trump might begin to question his moral authority, while critics saw it as further reason to challenge his leadership. Political observers noted that any major controversy regarding a first couple's marriage could be a symbol of deeper issues, reflecting on the administration's capacity to handle scrutiny. Questions arose about whether the president's inner circle had known about these alleged affairs, and if so, whether they had suppressed the story or planned to overshadow it with policy achievements. The entire development drew into question the notion that a White House under intense media scrutiny could effectively hide significant personal strife. Meanwhile, Freeman's role in this evolving narrative became another central theme. He was lauded by some as a champion for honesty, while others argued he had overstepped the boundaries of taste by inserting himself into a married couple's private affairs. There were discussions about whether a public figure with the gravity of Freeman's reputation should be treated differently from tabloids or lesser-known gossip columnists. Many insisted that precisely because of his integrity, he would not make such claims lightly. Others suspected he was being exploited by political opponents hoping to add fuel to a controversy that would distract from policy-making or political agendas. Speculation soared about who might have supplied Freeman with details. Was there a chance he had been led astray by questionable sources, or did he have first-hand knowledge? Among the tangled threads of debate, one aspect loomed large: the vulnerability of a marriage placed under the microscope of unending public scrutiny. Even before the election, the Trump's relationship had been dissected in headlines, though never with such accusatory force. Now, every photo and public moment felt laden with the weight of these accusations. Observers found themselves looking backward, trying to see if signs of unhappiness had always been in plain sight. Moments once brushed off as the typical stoicism of Melania or the brash confidence of Trump took on new significance. People recalled times when she pulled her hand away from his. Others pointed to fleeting expressions of tension that might have been momentary annoyance but were now magnified into potential evidence of irreparable cracks in the relationship. The psychological toll on the First Lady became a major point of concern for those who sympathized with her plight. Social media users, especially women, spoke about the indignity of having one's marital strife laid bare for the world to see. They imagined the emotional roller coaster of confronting rumors of infidelity while expecting unwavering public composure. Her stoicism suddenly looked less like a choice and more like a defense mechanism. Freeman's statements had inadvertently humanized her in a way no official White House portrait or carefully planned speech ever could. She was no longer just the polished figure by the president's side. She was an individual grappling with an avalanche of scrutiny and possible betrayal. Throughout these discussions, the newly elected president's persona remained a critical factor. One of the recurring themes was whether these alleged affairs fit with public perceptions of him. Critics pointed to past comments that suggested a cavalier attitude toward relationships, insisting this was not out of character. Supporters, on the other hand, insisted that being flawed or having a complicated past did not necessarily undermine his ability to lead. They questioned Freeman's credibility and suggested he was part of a politically motivated attempt to discredit a presidency still in its infancy. That tension lingered like a static charge, underpinning every conversation about the allegations and their repercussions. A unique dimension of Freeman's approach was that he did not present these accusations as mere salacious details. He emphasized the moral implications and how they reflected upon the office of the president. By focusing on the emotional and ethical consequences of betrayal within a marriage, he opened a broader cultural dialogue about the interplay between personal conduct and leadership capacity. The claims had moral weight, as though he was appealing to the conscience of the American public. Were they willing to overlook allegations of betrayal for the sake of political convenience? Or would these revelations spark a new wave of skepticism and distrust? Observers also noted that Freeman's words had a certain resonance because of his long-standing reputation for playing roles that exuded integrity. There was a sense of cognitive dissonance between his cinematic portrayals of wise, steadfast characters and the incendiary accusations he made. Some argued that his real-life persona had become inextricably linked to the virtues he displayed in film, leading audiences to give his allegations more credence than they might have had if they came from another actor. This phenomenon raised questions about celebrity influence on public discourse. Some worried it could be dangerous to conflate fictional heroism with real-world righteousness. Others believed that a man who had spent decades shaping iconic portrayals of moral fortitude might indeed be trusted to voice a legitimate concern. The ripple effect of these statements could be seen everywhere, from major newspapers to informal family gatherings. People debated whether or not it was even relevant to dwell on a president's private life. Did moral indiscretions equate to poor leadership? History was peppered with examples of leaders whose personal lives were complicated and sometimes scandalous, yet they were still praised for their political achievements. This time, however, the accusations were not being reported by an investigative journalist or a political opponent. They emerged from a beloved cultural figure who seemed unwavering in his conviction that the truth needed to be told. Throughout the continuous coverage, the image of Melania as a quiet but perhaps deeply wounded spouse took center stage in popular imagination. Freeman's broadcast brought out empathy for a figure often perceived as enigmatic or aloof. With the possibility that she was enduring heartbreak, the question became whether she felt trapped by her role. In analyzing her body language during official events and appearances, some viewers believed they detected heartbreak or a carefully concealed frustration. Her measured, graceful poise took on a new significance, and the public found itself simultaneously enthralled by and apologetic about the personal toll she might be enduring. Political strategists outside the White House speculated about how these accusations could reshape the administration's ability to govern effectively. Was this scandal large enough to overshadow the new president's policy goals? Could it erode trust to the point that every initiative was colored by doubts about his character? Some analysts suggested that if these rumors remained in the spotlight for too long, they would distract from everything else the administration tried to accomplish. Others believed the fervor would eventually die down, as the public's attention would shift to policy battles or global events. They noted that salacious stories, while capturing intense interest in the moment, often burned out quickly unless substantiated by concrete evidence or confessions. For many citizens, the entire ordeal raised an uncomfortable dilemma: how to reconcile support for certain policies with unease over a leader's personal actions. The argument reemerged that political figures are not saints, and that the measure of a president's worth lies in legislation, governance, and diplomacy rather than fidelity within marriage. Conversely, a vocal portion of the population contended that character and credibility were inseparable from leadership. If a leader broke vows to a spouse, they argued, it might signal a willingness to compromise on other promises. Freeman's address, in that sense, had tapped into a deeply rooted moral question facing the electorate. Friends of the First Lady, both real and rumored, had their own perspectives. Some were said to be rallying to her side quietly, offering support away from the spotlight. Others, previously uninterested in the gossip swirling around the White House, found themselves compelled to reach out in private. Yet, the public could only guess at what was happening behind the fortress of the presidency. The allegations by Freeman created a curtain of speculation so thick that nearly every small action or decision from the First Lady came under renewed scrutiny. Even something as simple as traveling separately or choosing not to attend certain events fueled more speculation. People asked whether these were signs of a deeper fracture in the marriage, evidence that the broadcast had touched a sensitive nerve, or simply logistical choices tied to protocol. Within the administration, the mood was said to be tense, as staffers tried to steer clear of a deeply personal issue they could not easily control. Political advisories usually revolved around shaping policy messages, managing press conferences, and handling crises of national interest. Now, they were plunged into the realm of personal scandal, left to wonder if their strategic planning might be derailed by renewed questions about whether the president could keep his own house in order. Some worried that sympathies might shift among key supporters if the marriage were truly in peril, while others felt confident that the base would rally around the president, rejecting Freeman's statements as Hollywood meddling. Critics continued to challenge Freeman, demanding more concrete proof to back his claims. Why hadn't he brought forward evidence beyond anecdotal accounts? Was there documentation, photographic evidence, or testimony from reliable witnesses? Despite these calls, the story's momentum did not wane. The public's appetite for any follow-up details seemed insatiable. Each time the broadcast was rebroadcast or discussed on daytime talk shows and late-night programs, more viewers were pulled into the unfolding drama. The conversation was no longer about one actor's revelations alone. It was about the entire spectacle of a revered celebrity confronting the president and first lady over something so intimately personal. The sense that this went beyond normal political discourse created a collective fascination that refused to subside. Melania became a figure for debate, as though she existed at the intersection of glamour, tragedy, and duty. Freeman had effectively made her central to his narrative, portraying her as the wounded party in a troubled relationship. Even as the public examined her every gesture, some recognized that her side of the story remained unheard. No statement emerged clarifying her perspective. She carried out her engagements with characteristic elegance, offering no overt hint of discord. Still, speculation grew that her composure masked deeper turmoil. In the absence of direct refutation, the swirling questions only gained more momentum. Behind all the intense speculation, the basic structure of the White House's agenda went forward, albeit overshadowed. Official announcements on economic policies or international relations vied for attention with endless chatter about the state of the president's marriage. Commentators began labeling this divergence as an echo of the increasingly blurred line between entertainment and politics. For some, Freeman's broadcast was emblematic of a media landscape that feasted on scandal, elevating it to a national conversation over policy or governance. For others, it was a necessary reckoning, forcing leaders to recognize that personal accountability matters to a portion of the public. Every day that passed brought a fresh wave of commentary, from op-eds questioning whether a first lady had the right to maintain privacy in matters of marital distress, to editorial cartoons depicting Morgan Freeman as a luminary shining light on hidden truths. It was a curious collision of celebrity influence and the rigor of political life, and the immediate result was a sensation that the line between private and public had become irreversibly crossed. There was no going back to an era when a president's personal matters could remain purely private. Instead, the question was now whether these allegations would provoke larger questions about the administration's credibility. The crux of Freeman's dramatic intervention remained the same: a call for honesty and transparency at the highest level. Yet the sincerity behind his motivations continued to be a subject of discussion. Was he truly motivated by concern for the nation's moral compass? Or did he harbor a personal vendetta against the president? Were these claims rooted in a broader societal reckoning with figures of authority who might abuse their power, or simply a sensational revelation intended to provoke? The robust debate over these points illustrated how profoundly this single broadcast had impacted the national psyche. Regardless of where one stood on the moral or political spectrum, it was near impossible to ignore the storm brewing around the allegations. As the program's clip circulated online, Morgan Freeman's calm, steady voice became something of a rallying cry for those who believed the president must be held to account for his personal conduct. For critics of the administration, it became a potent symbol of what they saw as a necessary confrontation. For supporters, it was an unwelcome intrusion into family matters that should remain private. Even those uninterested in politics found themselves drawn to the spectacle of a Hollywood legend and a famous first couple locked in a battle of insinuations and denials. With each replay of Freeman's statements, the tension only deepened, and the sense of curiosity about the details behind the allegations grew. The ripple effect also extended internationally. Global news networks picked up the story, framing it as a dramatic clash between a cultural icon and a newly installed president. People around the world speculated about what this scandal signaled for American politics. There was an almost voyeuristic element to the coverage, as if the entire globe was peering through a magnifying glass at a marriage under siege. Friends and foes of the United States alike debated whether the spectacle would harm American prestige. Some suggested it might show that the country was unafraid to scrutinize its leaders, while others saw it as a sign of deep societal division. Even as the White House attempted to pivot to policy announcements, the tension surrounding these allegations refused to dissipate. News anchors, talk show hosts, and online personalities continuously referred back to Freeman's remarks. They analyzed the ways in which public trust could be eroded by even the perception of a fractured marriage. Some believed that if the president could not maintain honesty within his most personal relationship, the public might question whether he was sincere when speaking about broader national issues. Others saw that argument as deeply unfair, pointing out that political leadership should be judged on tangible accomplishments rather than personal choices or the complexities of a private union. The conversation about Melania's emotional well-being persisted, with many empathizing with her potential predicament. They wondered if she felt betrayed not only by her husband's alleged actions, but by the media frenzy and celebrity commentary that now forced her private life into a public spectacle. Images of her standing quietly during ceremonies or diplomatic visits took on new meaning, as though behind her composed exterior was a torrent of conflicting feelings. Freeman's broadcast had effectively altered how people perceived her role. She was no longer a peripheral figure in the administration. She had become a focal point of national discourse about fidelity, vulnerability, and the cost of life in a glaring spotlight. The seriousness of the accusations led some to argue that Morgan Freeman had sparked a critical examination of the president's character at a pivotal moment. If the nation's leader could not be trusted to honor personal commitments, they posited, what implications might that have for his commitments to the electorate? This line of reasoning gained traction among political commentators who believed that character flaws could have policy implications, shaping how a leader engaged in negotiations or dealt with crises. Others fiercely disagreed, citing historical examples of leaders with complicated personal histories who nonetheless excelled in their governance. They were adamant that personal failings did not necessarily equate to poor executive decision-making. All the while, the sense that the new administration was walking on eggshells permeated the political atmosphere. Advisors to the president reportedly struggled to keep the focus on legislative goals. But the public's fascination with the alleged breakdown of the first couple's marriage refused to subside. High-profile publications were rumored to be investigating the story further, searching for any direct corroboration of Freeman's accusations. Unnamed sources claiming to have inside knowledge about the president's relationships made the rounds on smaller media outlets, further stirring speculation. Yet, the official stance from the White House was largely mute, perhaps hoping that the relentless news cycle would move on. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, What are your thoughts on Morgan Freeman accusing Trump and Melania's marriage? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.